Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by robotic process automation pioneer SS&C Blue Prism. Digital transformation has the potential to reshape the way companies service their customers, engage their employees, and manage their operations. Whether you're looking to develop strategies, tactics, or best practices to positively impact the future of work, or you're curious to see how other companies have successfully navigated their digital transformation programs, then this podcast is for you. We're here to help you transform now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Hairston with SS&C Blue Prism. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. Today, I'm happy to have as my guest Micah Friedman, Managing Director at the global advisory Alvarez Marsal. Micah is an expert in the hospitality sector, and he and I will be discussing the significant opportunity to reinvent this industry through emerging technology. Welcome, Micah. Why don't you start us off with an introduction?
Hi, Brad. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Just a quick introduction. I'm a lifelong hotelier, literally, and a longtime career technologist. Prior to joining Alvarez and Marsal, I was over in Hong Kong as CIO and CDO for Rosewood Hotel Group and a whole bunch of places before that. Let's jump right in.
All right. Fantastic. Clearly, the hospitality industry took one of the biggest hits from the pandemic. I was reading a recent survey across the pond in the UK, and it said that there's an expectation that about 35% of the UK's hospitality sector is going to be operating at a loss or be unviable by the end of this year. What is your perspective on the state of the industry overall?
Well, let's start with two things that are affecting everyone. One is a constrained labor market, and that seems to be a global phenomenon. And the other is a rising cost of goods sold. And that's a global, for lack of a better description, phenomenon. On a more global basis, things are equally as spotty. One of our biggest travel engines over the last 2 decades is the outbound Chinese traveler, and they've been virtually stuck at home now for a few years. So you see that manifested in a number of ways. Overall, international travel to the USA is way down. But there's still a strong appetite for travel, and domestic hotel companies or those with domestic operations are reporting strong business. So it's a mixed bag at best. And then there's a lot of uncertainty on the horizon with continued economic factors, continued labor impact factors, and we'll see where it goes. Wish I had the crystal ball.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges that you would say are pretty unique to the hospitality sector?
Overall, if we just start with cost of goods sold, that includes labor, energy, raw materials, food. All of those things are cost of goods sold to a hotel. And there's only so much you can charge for a room and still have the expectation someone's going to purchase that room and stay there and be satisfied with the price value equation, right?
Right.
So at a certain point, hotels and food service industries too, very, very much the same, are getting pinched. And then when do they raise prices? By how much? Now, all that happens against a backdrop of what seems to be, rising costs of credit, which at some point is going to impact liquidity, right? Interest rates are up sharply for around the globe. So it's not like they can borrow their way out of it in an efficient way. And then there's the shortage of people with the great resignation and, new options for people that might not have a college degree or a professional certification, or they just didn't love hospitality, but kind of fell into it. There's a lot of other opportunities out there, whether they're warehousing and logistics, biomedical. I mean, all of those other industries are taking good people. So there's a people shortage as well, all over the place.
So based on your many years in the industry, both as an operator and as an advisor, what are some of the big moves that these companies need to make in order to survive and thrive?
Just a few comments on this one, Brad.
Mhm.
In uncertain times, it's my opinion, and I wish I had a survey or a study to back me up, but it's the time to embrace a more data-driven mindset than any other time, because markets could be hot and cold. Regulatory environments are shifting. Be prepared for when China opens up as an example of mining your data, and how do you create demand in advance? Anyway, there's a whole bunch of ways that companies should be embracing analytics right now, because many of the playbooks for things they thought they knew pretty well in the past are not so strong anymore. So number one is definitely be embracing those analytics. Number two is, over the last 10, 15, 20 years, there's been a real intense and ongoing focus on customer experience. And every major company has their app and a highly optimized website, and their loyalty program is pretty much down to an art and a science. What's been lacking in a lot of areas is that same intensity on associate experience. So, attracting and retaining the best fits for the companies and the jobs you need is more important now than ever, right?
Mhm.
Both of them, attracting and retaining. So some focus on associate experience could pay some strong dividends. And then finally, then you'll like this one, is this is a great time to be looking at automation options. The macro factors are there with rising costs and of labor and decreased availability of qualified workers in so many areas. The opportunity has never been as viable as it is now. And more so, there's always an apprehension to eliminate jobs in favor of automation, just to kind of address the elephant in the room. But I suspect in many cases now, that's not the case, and there are empty jobs waiting to be filled that they can't fill. So even better time to, you know, get your feet wet with automation. And then finally, all the technologies are well understood and are mainstream at this point. Maybe 10 years ago, a tech leader could say, well, it's a little bleeding edge. But I think that those arguments are, a thing of the past. So the three things, Brad, that I think companies should really be
Okay.
doing. Number one is embracing analytics and kind of re-examining their old playbooks. Number
Mhm.
two is the associate experience. And then number three, obviously, I think automation is a key play.
Yeah, with some exceptions, I would agree that the hospitality industry has not been on the forefront or the leading edge of the automation revolution. What has changed to position them to make a move now, to embrace automation and be more progressive on that front?
Let's explain that first a little bit. So hotel companies, when you think of Marriott or Hilton or Accor or Intercontinental or Choice or whomever, they've been asset light for years. They don't own those hotels.
Mhm.
Investors, REITs, individual investors, small groups of investors own 1, 2, 7, 20, 100 in different brands.
Right.
And right.
Mhm.
And as investors, they're looking for return on investment to control costs, because hotels can be hit and miss at times. There's some seasonality potentially or other factors. And getting owners to spend on extras creates a lot of tension for hotel companies. So in any franchisee, franchisor, or manager, managee type relationship, you that angst is no good. So hotel companies tend to enforce standards where they need to. Right. And then knowing that there could be resistance and a multi-year deployment because of, if it's technology that needs to go into a property. Let's think of digital room keys, for example.
Mhm.
For a company with millions and millions of hotel rooms, telling all of those owners to spend $250 per room key, it's a big bite for everybody, right? The math
Mhm.
adds up very, very fast. So that's one reason you don't see hotels generally at the bleeding edge of embracing technology. And the second reason at the property is the need for strong data and strong processes.
Mhm.
So, so those kind of hinder innovation a little bit as well. You might, at least in areas.
Yep.
But then you look at the hotel companies above property, and historically, they've been technology leaders. Some of the early generations of central reservation systems were
Mhm.
astonishing technology feats for their time. And even today, we're seeing above property or corporate technologies that are still pretty advanced when you stack them up against other industries. For example, revenue management. There are some machine learning smart platforms out there now that have flipped the industry on their edge. So I do think that in pockets, there are constraints on the industry. In other areas where you see less constraints, hotel companies have tend to invested more in differentiating technologies.
Mm-hmm.
But still, those big investments of years and years ago, and there's a lot of culprits here, the car rental industry, airline industry, the travel exchanges of the world, and I'll avoid naming names of companies. They have legacy technology galore, right? And now that was once a differentiator, now becomes an inhibitor, but that's a topic for a different podcast, probably.
Yeah. Okay. So all that helps explain why they maybe haven't been as progressive. What has changed that gives you hope that there's now a chance to do some of the things like around automation, for example, that they haven't pursued in the past?
Well, every company's got their own set of priorities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you sit in the chair and you're looking at the three things you need to get done, only recently has reduced dependence on labor been something that might bubble up to the top three.
Right.
That's not something that's been there traditionally and not something managers are brought up thinking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big factor.
Yeah.
Is that now it's worked its way onto the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to enabling things like the fact that there are viable platforms,
Mm-hmm.
that it's a road that's been traveled, maybe not hugely well traveled. It's not the interstate highway quite yet, but it's certainly a strong road that's been traveled. And the risk equation is certainly or the perception is certainly much lower
Right.
than it's been traditionally as well. So I think a variety of factors come together to say, hey, you're having trouble filling these roles to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
The workload hasn't changed. The transactions you need to process every day haven't changed. What are my solutions? And if folks could have integrated their way out of some of these messes, I'm sure they would have. But we can start in the back office and then kind of work our way through the mid office and the front office, because an indictment of these industries is many of them are siloed, and finance lives over here, customers live over there. And in those silos, you end up moving a lot of data, and eventually things like automation will take over some of those tasks where integration is not even possible. So I think
Right.
it's technology time is just coming now.
Okay. With regard to automation, Michael, where do you think it can make the biggest difference in this sector? Is it optimizing the back office or making more improvements in the customer journey?
I think the customer journey's been invested in heavily, and
Mm-hmm.
those will continue to evolve. But in terms of meeting the problems of today, I think the big bang for the buck appears to be in the back office and the mid office,
Mm-hmm.
because those front office functions are pretty well the same or similar or standardized around the industry. Checking in, checking out, those moments of truth with booking a dining reservation, depends hotels, spa, resort. There's not a lot of room to automate in there.
Mm-hmm.
There is things like customer self-service really decrease your reliance on people, maybe for room service or things of that sort. And instead of two people, you need one. That's a valid strategy too, to operate with less people.
Right.
Right. But kind of to wrap this up, I think the back office is probably,
Yeah.
especially when you think of things like shared services, which the industry is rife with,
Yep.
those present the biggest opportunity.
That makes sense. So, Micah, aside from software robots, what does the opportunity look like for physical robots in this industry?
I'm really glad you asked, because there's actually an impact, and it's not a one size fits all solution, because unfortunately the ecosystem hasn't developed like that quite yet. Maybe it will, but there's a lot of ways to use physical robots to decrease. Maybe you don't eliminate people, but you might decrease your reliance on people. So one easy use case is think about a Roomba with a housekeeper. If that housekeeper doesn't have to spend an extra 10 minutes vacuuming because the Roomba is doing it while he or she is tending to other matters, then that room is turned much faster. And maybe that same housekeeper can turn 4 or 5 more rooms per day. So the technology and the physical robot can supplement the human. It's not quite a cyborg yet, but it's getting there. It'll be a while before we see robots folding sheets and making beds. I think that's a little advanced. But the room service use cases, I think smart signage becomes a way to in busier locations, conference locations, deflect the need for extra people, customer self-service. So all of these can combine to reduce your need for people. Now, there are RPA and automation type use cases in hotels proper, and some companies are just starting to tackle that. And we'll see where that goes. It's very interesting to watch.
Micah, as companies make the move into automation of all flavors, how should they evaluate their investment in technology and measure ROI? That's always a important thing to figure out. So I'm curious about your perspective on how they should do that.
This is a really tough question because there are certain technologies that differentiate you in the marketplace and produce revenue. And that might be your e-commerce platform or other platforms. And there, a P&L can and should make perfect sense. And then there are other areas of technology like ERPs, back office, et cetera, where it's much harder to have a so-called ROI. In fact, how would you even calculate that? If we were to do all this manually, it would cost us X, but now it costs us Y. Is that where you go with it? I mean, so I've always struggled with ROI on what I'll call overhead. What you end up doing is coming up with all kinds of stuff that years later you end up laughing at. So there, I think the name of the game on those platforms is reducing TCO. And now more holistically, we could say, what do the humans that need to operate this platform cost us as well? And I think that's a good place to start because that'll point you in directions of scale, right? Or highly repetitive tasks, more than likely. So take stock of where you are, like with any journey. Where are your pain points? Where's their scale? Where's their repetitive work? Get yourself educated. Talk to companies like yourselves, or talk to advisors like us and consultants, and build awareness around your options and what are the art of the possible and what are other companies doing. And then, like anything, you can start small, take your lessons learned and scale appropriately. So as you take your first steps, I think, what are your goals is probably the first things you should establish.
What about smart building technology? Many hotels have invested heavily in that area. Has that made a difference, in your opinion?
Well, there's different flavors of that. And what we're seeing from Marriott and Hilton predominantly are more advanced in-room controls that all integrate back to their app, which is all fascinating stuff. And they've done incredible jobs. And with the Hilton app, you can check in and have ESPN or your favorite news channel on, and have the room at the right temperature waiting for you. So you see some IoT there, and it's really cool. It's also integrated with their room locks. Very cool stuff. But you haven't really seen a lot of smart buildings yet that have all of the utilities fully digitized, that have the smart lighting, the smart water metering, the right sensors in place in all the rooms for flood, leak, fire, and smoke detection, et cetera. So I think the next generation of hotel buildings, you're going to see a lot more true smartness built in, married potentially with that in-room experience or other public space experience. And then I think, and this would really also apply to cruise lines and to casinos as well, aside from hotels, is then you really have a 360-degree view of what people are physically doing. And I don't mean that in a creepy way, but you might change your goods and services based on what you're seeing. Are there constantly lines? Are there, so I won't say forget privacy because privacy is paramount always, but assume that anonymously you just knew where all these things were happening. And over time, you're able to make smarter decisions. I think that works for everyone. Anyway, so I think there's more and more penetration. Once again, it's expensive to build a new hotel. You see a lot of hotels getting converted,
Mhm.
and typically conversion folks like to build in a lot more energy efficiency and some intelligence.
So, Micah, how is Alvarez and Marsal helping your clientele in the hospitality sector approach digital transformation in the most effective manner?
Well, digital transformation is in and of itself isn't necessarily a business outcome, right?
Right.
And we focus on delivering business outcomes. And being technology agnostic gives us certain advantages in
Hmm.
that regard. But we are focused on a handful of what we think are high impact themes. And we say that because these are things we know that are on our clients' minds and industry focused. And one I touched on earlier, and that's modernization of the legacy technologies. I mean, it was just recently that a major car rental company went bankrupt because of a fleet management systems constraint. There's a lot of stories similar to that, but I'll avoid going there for the sake of brevity. So we think it's critical for companies to have modern platforms that drive business capabilities and
Hmm.
technology enabled capabilities specifically. We're also very focused on automation and workforce optimization.
Hmm.
We don't think that's a fad. We think it's structural and here to stay. And we have from automation all the way through advanced analytics, a series of solutions to help customers get into those worlds and take more advantage of the platforms and the data that they have. Enterprise resilience really is a big focus. How do we help companies enhance their overall resilience? We don't know. I think if anything, the last 3 years taught us we don't know what we don't know. And how do we better prepare for those things we don't know about? Also, we cover a number of industries: airlines, cruise, car rental, and hotels. And across that landscape, ESG and compliance is another area of concern of both customers and the companies that serve those customers. We also have a full range of professional services to help companies grow organically or inorganically. And now to really go right to digital transformation, because it's the buzzword,
Hmm.
we do have a great digital team that focuses on design thinking, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, and we call that Amplify. And that's a relatively new team and a very exciting set of capabilities for us all to draw on.
That's great. And Micah, I know you're not a lone wolf. I think you have some colleagues that have been hired into A&M to focus specifically on hospitality and travel, correct?
Correct. We're up to about 11 of us, including me at this point. So we have
Yeah.
a sizable team and we're out there working. It's great.
Yeah. Clearly you're making a big bet on this sector, so that's exciting to see. You mind if I hit you with one personal question as we wrap up?
Please go ahead.
What's the best thing you've read, watched, or listened to lately?
I really enjoyed Foundation on Apple TV. That's the old Isaac Asimov
Yeah.
series, saga, whatever you'd like to call it. And being a total nerd, of course, I loved all that. But it was great for me to see Harry Seldon brought back to life. So
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't checked that out yet, but have had other people recommend it, so I'll have to give it a watch. Well, Micah, it's been great having you on. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective with us, and I'm definitely excited to see your enthusiasm around hospitality. I think this is the first time we've shined the light on hospitality, and clearly Alvarez and Marsal is making a big bet in this space and really expecting that there's going to be a ton of opportunity to help this industry turn things around. So I wish you the very best, and thanks again for being on the show.
thanks for having me, Brad. Great discussion. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to Transform Now. For more insightful discussions on digital transformation and more, check out our podcast channel where you'll find all of our previous episodes. And to make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you like what you've heard, please leave us a review. For more information about digital transformation and the future of work, check out blueprism.com to learn how SS&C Blue Prism's digital workforce is enabling enterprise transformation now.